You see how you could stay?
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am Senator Golden's legislative aide. Welcome to tonight's Water Forum. Thank you for joining us tonight. As we're all getting settled, I'd like to just go over some logistics for the evening and let you know about the flow of events that you can expect tonight. We'll begin with opening remarks from Senator Golden, who will then introduce each of our panelists of local water experts from here in Southern Oregon. After all panelists have given their presentations, I'll be asking our pre-submitted questions to the panelists, which will be followed by live questions from you. I do ask if you are unmuted right now, if you could please mute yourself. I do ask if you are unmuted right now, please mute yourself. I will go ahead and mute everyone. Great.
Now you're muted, Sarah.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, I'll just say that part again. So please remain muted while we are going through our panelists' presentations and our pre-submitted questions. After that, we'll have time for live Q&A if you'd like to ask a live question to our panelists or Senator Golden. And with that, Senator Golden, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. And Sarah, thank you very much for organizing this forum. Really appreciate it. And hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. There are 100 people on this call right now, and that tells me a lot about the gravity of this problem. You know, I did think do we really want to schedule a forum about water and drought in December and January? Like, you know, what drought, what water problem? But folks obviously understand where we are and the need to find a smart approach for what's coming, because we have some rough years ahead around water and wildfire both. So thank you for coming. We're going to try to keep this as close as we can to an hour total. And we've got 4 presenters who we were really lucky to get in terms of their variety of expertise they have in this field. And then you submitted quite a few questions. We've got more questions really than we're going to have time to ask. So we are going to move right along. There were a couple of questions in there that I'm going to answer on the front end because they really relate to the work that we just did in the legislature in special session. What is it, 3 weeks ago, December 13th, I think, something like that, where we were able to get a $25 million appropriation for illegal cannabis grows around the state. And the largest portion of that, most of the grants of that grant money, not most of it, but the largest single portion will come to Jackson County. And after that, probably Josephine County. So given that, with the experience we've just had and the campaign we successfully completed to get that money, there was a question that asked if there are funds coming to protect irrigation water and infrastructure from the marijuana growers. And that was identified as one of the major issues that caused for this emergency appropriation. So of the $25 million just appropriated for the coming year, $5 million of that goes to the Water Resources Department just to hire more staff on the ground to do more monitoring, more education, and more enforcement with the help of law enforcement, because some of these grows are run by people you wouldn't want to visit if you didn't have law enforcement with you. So we believe that that's a single year's appropriation, that $5 million. The other $20 million out of the 25 will go to counties through a grant process that has already been tried. It's a good, successful process. And this is a little off the topic of water, but the whole idea of an emergency appropriation was that law enforcement around the state and code enforcement need to staff up right now need to go through the several months it takes to staff up, recruiting, hiring, training. And if we waited until the regular session in February, we felt we wouldn't be effective in 2022. And the state leadership agreed and gave that 20 million to go out to counties. So, but then we've got another conversation to have in the 2022 session about long-term funding for the Water Resources Department to do the enforcement. There's a lot of discussions. There are a lot we didn't do in special session that's waiting for us in February around policy. The other question, somewhat related, said, we are concerned about water theft by illegal cannabis growers and are hoping there will be more money available for enforcement. Can funds be taken from taxes on legal cannabis to help with this? Water thieves should really be prosecuted. Well, there's agreement on that last sentence. That's a long conversation. It has been proposed that taxation be increased on the legal growers. And what, we have in this county, all the sort of publicity has gone to some really difficult folks who are outside the law and causing all kinds of problems. We also have a number of people in the Rogue Valley who have gone to substantial trouble and expense to grow cannabis, both hemp and marijuana, legally. And there's, a lot of feeling that I think has merit that this could be an important industry and involve a lot of family wage jobs. And the illegal industry is threatening it. And the folks who are going through all the hoops and had a really rough year, in large part because of the illegal grows and the difficulty finding finding labor to do a legal operation, they're not in great shape financially. And the idea of making it even more financially challenging through more taxation has some problems with it. So there's a longer conversation to be had, but at this point, at any rate, I would not be favoring increasing taxation on legal growers to solve this problem. It's broader than that. So those are the two questions I'll take on. Let's hear from our four presenters, and then we'll go to Q&A. The first is, I will introduce them one at a time. The first is Siobhan Hayes, and he's the water master in Jackson County for the Oregon Water Resources Department. Siobhan, welcome. Are you muted, Siobhan?
How's that?
Yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Feels better. Okay. Two mute buttons I found. So I suppose thank you for putting this together. Thank you for having me. Once again, my name is Siobhan Hayes. I'm the water master for District 13, which covers most of Jackson County. The agency I work for is the Oregon Water Resources Department. And so it's the state agency that is given the task to kind of manage the water resources within the state of Oregon. And these water resources could be what we would consider surface water, which is waters above the ground, and or groundwater. So anybody that's using water for any type of agricultural purposes, even for some domestic purposes, most folks have to get a water right permit through my agency. And it's my task as the water master to make sure that folks that are using water have these water rights, are using the water as described in these permits. And in times of shortage, we often have to go out and do what we call our regulation processes and, shut off junior water use. So folks that don't have as old of a water right to satisfy the need of water right holders that have an older priority date. As anybody can imagine, this year was a very, very challenging year. Usually we'll have some issues that may come up. We may have a drought. We may have issues with wildfire. We may have an issue where there's a new industry that everybody's concerned about. So it's a new water application for irrigation, but it's still irrigation. We may have something like that. This year, everything happened kind of all at once. So it was very, very challenging. And, many folks were, kind of used to these processes happening. They worked or farmed on smaller creeks and streams that historically would have some regulations associated with it based on priority date. What was really different this year than any year was what happened with the sources for the irrigation districts. The high mountain reservoirs that supply supplemental and primary water to Medford Irrigation, Rogue River Valley Irrigation, and Talent Irrigation District. To compound on the issues with Talent Irrigation District, they lost their district manager just before the beginning of the distribution season. And so all these different processes really made the distribution season extremely challenging. And so that's why I think, having conversations like we're having tonight, getting folks together that have some insight on these water resources and the public opportunity to ask questions so the right information is coming from the proper people and giving it to the public is extremely instrumental and beneficial. My hope and my, one of the outcomes that I hope that happens as a result of this meeting and this group getting together is that this energy doesn't change, that we continue to meet on a regular basis and provide an opportunity to give the information to the public and answer questions that do come up. One thing that, in my opinion, that could really be beneficial as well is having, a sustainable group that can meet regularly to have these conversations. Have like a basin coordinator for the area to help, disseminate, information that's coming in to the folks that need it, and help, organize with resources to folks, that may need to, improve their infrastructure to use water more wisely, to coordinate with irrigation districts about, future water plans. Because, preparing for shortfalls for water and having these solutions doesn't happen overnight. It takes, many efforts from many individuals, professional and, and stakeholders to come together, work together, look at the resources that are available so that the best decisions are made. I do have a slide that I was going to share at the very end. It's just some contact information, it has my contact on it, and some links to the Oregon Water Resource Department webpage, where there's many resources that folks can access to find out information about, how do they find their water rights. Links to, stream gauges within the whole area, and groundwater information. So this is a lot of information and data that, I help collect and my agency helps collect, and that we provide on our webpage, and just making sure people have, access to those data sets so they can better be informed with decisions that they're making. And with that, that's all I had at the moment.
Siobhan, thank you. Let me ask you one quick question, please. I mentioned the $5 million that just got appropriated to the Water Resources Department. We're expecting to see something like 6 or 7 more positions in the Rogue Valley of people on the ground. How hopeful are you that that can really improve the situation with regard to water theft and illegal water use?
I think that's going to help greatly. Currently, for my district 13, we have one state-funded assistant water master, and we have one state assistant water master for Josephine and Curry County, and one water master for Douglas and Coos County. Between these 3 districts, currently we have, I believe, 3 assistant water masters. So increasing those assistant positions, by 6, I mean, that's going to be, a great help to, having more people out in the field, seeing stuff as it comes up, and most importantly, being able to be proactive, seeing stuff ahead of time before being reactive on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I'd like to next introduce Julie Smitherman. Julie is the Water Resources Coordinator at the Medford Water Commission. And I think she still helps out in the city of Ashland too, which is where I know her work with water. Julie, welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. And I do have a slideshow to go through, but I have a lot of information and I'm going to get through it as fast as I can. If you would like a copy of the presentation after, I'm happy to send that to you. I've been working for the Water Commission for the last year. I was working for the city of Ashland before that for the last 9 years. And I've been in this industry for about 13 years now. So just want to go over first the different sources that we have here in our valley. How the drought has impacted those sources and what we can do going forward in the future. So just a little history about where our water is coming from. And we're going to look at this from a municipal perspective first. So we have the Rogue River watershed, as well as the Big Butte Springs watershed. And so those are our main sources. And these sources provide water to approximately 140,000 people. We serve Medford and White City, but we also serve the cities of Central Point, Eagle Point, Jacksonville, Phoenix, Talent, and Ashland on an emergency basis. Big Butte Springs is our primary source, so we use that all year round, and we can use up to 19 million gallons a day. It has decreased over the years, so we were able to pump more, but in the last few years, it's dropped by 20%. So our maximum that we can flow in a pipe right now from Big Butte Springs is 19 MGD. We then have to supplement with the Rogue River water come about springtime because, of course, irrigation. And so usage increases, and so we needed a second source. And that is the Duff treatment plant that's located out on the Rogue River. There's a picture there. Historically, it runs May through October, but we're now seeing it run April through November. So a longer season, relying more heavily on the Rogue River. It does make up the difference for our lower spring flows. Our system demands, total system capacity is about 64 MGD. And our current demand right now, serving all of those cities that I just said, except for Ashland, is only 16 million gallons per day. Now in the summertime, that can go up to about 47 million gallons per day. And this last year, we peaked at 54 million gallons. So this last year started out, as everyone knows, it did not start out very well. We had a very a warm spring. With minimal snowpack and precipitation. These compounding years of drought, this was not just a one-year event. These compounding years of drought has created these lower spring flows for the Water Commission. With that little precipitation we had, and then we had those warm spells really early in the season. And now, unfortunately, we are starting out lower than we were at the beginning of last year. And if you can see that light blue line, I'm pointing at it, but I don't know if you can see that. That light blue line shows what the flows were at the springs last year. Now the dashed line that has the star on it, that's where we currently are with our stream flows. So it is lower. And even though we've gotten all of this snow and all of this precipitation recently, a lot of that water is held up in that snowpack right now. So as soon as that starts to melt off, I anticipate the flows to go up a little bit.
Julie, is that dotted line an average over a certain number of years?
It is. This is an average over 20 years. So the average is that dotted line in the center of the graph. Then below that is a blue line that goes all the way. It starts out in October and goes all the way until the end of September for that last year. And now we're just starting out our new water year as of October. And this is where our flows are currently. And because they are low like this, that is the reason why we can only get 19 million gallons a day into that pipe, into town. Mm-hmm. So this has caused us to have to use our secondary source much earlier than typical. And so we had a record production this year as a result of our record demand earlier in the year and the reduced supply from the spring. So we had to start up April 1st this year of our secondary source. During this time, we've encouraged our customers to take advantage of all of our efficiency programs and the resources that we offer. And luckily, we were able to make it through the summer, thanks to having the stable supply that we did, and the effort of our community to use water as appropriately and responsibly as possible.
Now I'm just going to touch quickly on Ashland's water sources because that is different from the Medford Water Commission sources. Ashland has a reservoir up above town. It's Reeder Reservoir. So it does not, the main source of water for Ashland's drinking water does not come from Immigrant Lake as some people understood. We do have our own source in Ashland, but our secondary source for when the reservoir water isn't enough is the TID water that comes through town. And most of the time it's used for irrigation of residential properties. However, if we have a shortage in Ashland, that water can be used. It's pumped to the treatment plant where it is treated to drinking water standards. Now this year, they did not have TID at all. And so immediately jumped to the third source, the emergency source, which is the Rogue River, which is the Talent Ashland Phoenix Intertie. We call it the TAP. And so they utilize that water much earlier in the season. This really shows the watershed area, where Ashland's water is coming from. And everything in that pink zone is all flowing down into that little bit of Reeder Reservoir. And you can see the difference in size from that to Immigrant Lake over on the right. This is a source, comes from the Siskiyou Mountains. That's different from Big Butte Springs, comes from the Cascades. Same with the Rogue River. This is Siskiyou Mountains, serves about 2,100 people, or 21,000, excuse me. And every spring, the Reeder Reservoir does typically fill up to 100%. That's not the problem. The problem is how long that lasts. And so usually they supplement with TID water to get through. But because they didn't have TID this year, because of the shortage, they started using TAP. They did have a high water demand early in the year. It peaked at 6 million gallons in June, which usually doesn't peak until July or August. They implemented voluntary reduction requests and the community was able to reduce water use. And there is a lot of future planning taking place to include climate impacts to the Ashland water supply. And that's going to be done with the future 2023 update to the Water Management and Conservation Plan. And now there's the irrigation districts, a completely other source of water. And they've been impacted the most by this ongoing drought, these compounding years of drought. Those reservoirs just haven't had a chance to fill up. I know many of you, I'm speaking to the choir here, many of you went through this. So some crop yields were reduced, not planted. Quality was poor. There's been more tree mortality. There's a lot going on. Shutoffs occurred early, 2 months earlier than usual. And many people are looking for alternate supplies. So this is what those lakes usually look like. This is what we want them to look like every year. This is ideal, but unfortunately they have not looked like this for some time. And they currently are looking about like this, 3%, 5%. It's that southeastern part of our county that's really got hit hard because you can see Fish Lake and also 4 Mile and Agate are a little more full than the others. It's that area that seems to be getting hit the hardest. So this compounding years of drought, it's gonna, and snow accumulation, it's gonna take several years to recover from. One event like we've had, it's been so exciting to have all this snow and precipitation, but one event isn't likely enough to get us through. We need this to continue through the rest of the winter. Trends are showing more frequent drought years, heavier rain, less snowpack. Like we said, in 2021, that's exactly what we saw. Drier soils, higher evapotranspiration, which increases the need for water or the use of water. And every water supply is impacted differently, as we've shown here during the drought. And again, the irrigation districts were hit the hardest. 2022 started off better, but we need that to keep going. And this makes me happy, looking at this map showing all the blue and the more of the blue colors and not the red. So I know it's just the beginning, but I'm still happy to see these snow water equivalent averages for our area. I mean, we're about 187% of normal for this time of year. So what can we do? All right, there's a lot of things. We need to be proactive, take advantage of our local technical assistance, rebates, state and federal funding, because there is a lot out there now. There's been a lot passed by state and federal to help in these areas. Know how much water you use or that you need. Reach out to your local water utility, your irrigation district, soil and water conservation district. See if anyone offers a home evaluation to provide you with how much water should you be using, and just get a better idea of what you need. Upgrade your indoor fixtures and appliances, as well as look for opportunities in your landscaping to provide more climate appropriate plantings, and upgrade your efficiencies in your irrigation practices. Fix leaks, that's the biggest thing that you could do. And then look at gray water and or rainwater catchment potential. And every site is going to be different, so it's not going to work for everyone, but it is something that you should look into. And then what's also very important is to support upgrades to water supplier system infrastructure that will improve efficiency and resiliency long-term. This may include some rate increases. Obviously, that's not what we want. That's not ideal, but in order to get some of these things done and prepare for the future, that could happen. And so to be supportive of those changes and those increases is going to be really important going forward. So I don't like to just sit and say, what can customers do, but what can water suppliers do? They can continue to offer long-term conservation efficiency programs, provide education, technical assistance, and rebates to try to maximize our water resources. Upgrade our infrastructure internally. We're upgrading infrastructure and we're trying to achieve increased efficiency and resiliency. I talked about the rate increases. Municipalities, water suppliers, apply for those grants and those low interest loans that are out there to reduce costs for water system improvement projects, and thus reducing the cost to the customer. And then important long-term planning. Look at the supply, look at the demand, look at those trends, see how things are changing. Do master plans, water management and conservation plans, and then also climate reviews. And we're trying to track and implement solutions to decrease water losses within the water distribution system. That's really important to us too. We're asking the community to reduce and fix their leaks. We want to do the same thing. And then it's important for us all to try to partner and collaborate with local agencies, with communities to promote the efficient use of water. We need to do this together because it's going to take all of us working together to make these changes happen. Okay, I know I might have gone over my time and I apologize, but here is some contact information. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like a copy of the presentation.
Julie, that was really good. Please put your contact info in the chat if you would.
I will, yes.
And I just want to mention your prior slide about what water suppliers can do and your comment that it may mean rate increases in the future. It might, but I did want to note that last session, the legislature appropriated about $400 million for water infrastructure projects, which
Exactly.
is way more than it's ever done before. We were able to do it because of the influx of federal money. And some of that will be coming to the Rogue Valley.
Yes, it will. And that's exactly what we're looking at. I know the irrigation districts are looking at that money, City of Ashland, and also the Medford Water Commission. So would someone help me not to stop? Okay, stop sharing. There we go. We're good.
No more sharing.
No more sharing.
Thank you very much, Julie.
No problem.
I'd like to introduce Greg Stayback, who's with the Rogue Valley Council of Governments. Greg, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can pull up I just have a quick presentation. Let's see if I can get it going. Too much stuff on my screen. Here we go. All right, so my name is Greg Stayback. I'm the Natural Resources Program Manager for the Rogue Valley Council of Governments, and I've been working down here for over 20 years, and our organization focuses a lot on regional projects, regional coordination. So we work with the cities, the counties, the public, local organizations, watershed councils, agencies like the Freshwater Trust are really trying to focus on big issues. And from our department, Natural Resources, we focus a lot on water. So my perspective is some of the things that I've observed and, reflect kind of my thinking or my opinions on how I'm seeing changes over the last 20 years. Again, my background is in hydrology, so I really focus on water quality and stream restoration, particularly in surface waters. We do a lot of work under the Clean Water Act with a couple of different programs, so managing urban runoff, and then other focused on water quality. And we work again with all the cities, the irrigation districts, watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts. So we collectively try to plan and implement programs that'll help out. We're also looking at water supplies. I also, I know where it's drought and fires is really a focus, but I'm also thinking about some extreme events, which also includes flooding. So, and some of the impacts we see from that. So current status of water, we do a lot of water quality monitoring. So, in the last decade or so, the water quality in Bear Creek was increasing for a while, kind of stabilized. And the last 3 years with the repeated droughts, we're kind of waiting to see. And then of course we have the additions of fires and other things. So we're really looking at to see how much the system is hit. And it's still a little bit of an unknown right now. We still have very healthy fish runs. So we're happy to see that we did get the Chinook come back. So in October is the best time to look for fish. There's one emphasize that there still is some good news. There's excellent water quality still in the Rogue. And then again, emphasize that there's a lot of great work that's been done, and we've tried to be as proactive as we can with managing for a changing condition. And we got ahead the best we could, but there's certainly a lot of catching up we need to do. So continued current status. As we know, there's a lot of competing uses for water, and a lot of them can't coexist. So some are left without water or insufficient supplies. We know we've had shortened irrigation season. There's been a lot of fish rescue, in particular this past year. So just a lot of things that we need to think about. And then again, as we're getting higher temperatures in the summer and lower flows as well, it leads to a lot of problems, algae, low oxygen. So definitely an increased concern. So some of the things that we've been dealing with, again, I've been working here over 20 years. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing the continued extreme events, and they're more frequent. So not only droughts, but we also get heavy rains, and we're getting, some floods, we get fires. So just looking at, again, all those events, we're starting to see some potential, at least predictions in, we're anticipating a change in precipitation. We may have the same amount of overall precipitation, but it's going to be more rain, less snow, or snowpack. The snowpack is what we rely on for a lot of our water supply and storage. So that's a huge difference. Even if we end up getting more rain, less snowpack. So thinking about that, we have less surface water, less groundwater, again, impacting irrigation season, snowpack. From our perspective, we do a lot of modeling when we design different facilities for what was the 25-year storm or a flood. Basically that means it occurs on average once in 25 years. The same with floods. Well, now that we have everything changing, we need to start changing our scales and thinking about, again, how we can better predict those impacts if it's possible. We're seeing some increased water quality concerns, harmful algal blooms, and some other things. And then again, just continue, challenges. Like one of the things we're facing now as part of our restoration is something we're all heavily involved in to provide shade to streams and habitat and other things, is that there's not a lot we're running into shortage with irrigating the native plants the first couple of years on projects. So we're trying to figure out, again, how to address that. And again, I just wanted to take a step aside a minute and saying it's not all bad. We're seeing a lot of system resiliency. There's a lot of species are adapting, the system's responding. Again, we've gotten a little bit of proactive management in, protected some areas, rebuilt some areas, and we have been planning for that changing climate restoration, protecting the area, some of our infrastructure, again, as best as we can. So what can we do? Julie hit on some of this, in terms of, using water wisely, conserve, even look into potential reuse options for certain types of activities. Again, we've been emphasizing the collective we, not just our agency personally, planting native species more adapted to local conditions. In theory, doesn't need as much water. Planning for resiliency. We're gonna, living with fire, living with drought is a reality. So starting to plan that's a reality, and we're gonna have to, just live with that. So doing the best we can to build around that. There's a lot of local planning efforts, Bear Creek Restoration Initiative that's looking at, restoration along the Greenway path and the riparian corridor. So there's opportunity for, learning more, volunteering, hearing what's going on. And then, one of the things I mentioned with the changing, the 25-year storm, 50-year storm is really saying, okay, the system is changing. So starting to really think differently in changing our management approach and kind of our responses to the system. I believe that's everything I have. Yep.
Thanks, Greg. Real quickly, the basis foundation of the COG is collaboration among different local governments. How would you grade us when it comes to water and water adaptation? Are most of our local jurisdictions thinking valley-wide or bioregion wide, or because some have more natural advantage in the water situation than others? Is there a collective sense of what we need to do?
There's a lot of great collaboration locally. I mean, especially among the restoration, which I'm heavily involved in, but also there's a local, the Rogue Drinking Water Partnership, which is really looking at, some of these issues collectively and trying to figure out how to manage, just different issues related to water supply, water quality, and other things. So, I mean, there's a really good collaborative nature, and it involves, again, all the major drinking water providers, communities, the Rogue River Watershed Council, and others. So, I mean, again, there's this great foundation of collaboration. I mean, there's always more that can be done, but this area has really worked well together for a long time. Something that's very effective.
Thank you. We've got one more presenter, and that's Francis O'Young, Program Director at Rogue Riverkeeper, who I miss on the folk show on Sunday nights on JPR, so I wish she still did that. But Francis, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, I'm Francis O'Young. I'm the Program Director at Rogue Riverkeeper. And let me get my other stuff up here. Okay. All right. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today, and thanks everyone for being involved, because as you can tell, this is a really important topic, something that's going to matter not only to us, but future generations. So appreciate everyone being engaged on this. In case you didn't know, Rogue Riverkeeper is a nonprofit advocacy organization, and we work to protect clean water, native fish, and healthy communities in the Rogue Basin through advocacy, accountability, and community engagement. And we're a part of a worldwide organization called the International Waterkeeper Alliance, which is made up of over 300 waterkeepers around the world. Oops, there we go. Too many screens going. Did want to acknowledge that the Rogue Valley was originally inhabited by the Shasta, Tequilma, and the Rogue River Athabascan people. And appropriately, Tequilma means those along the river. Just to get you oriented if you're not clear, and I think you can see my pointer. Here's Crater Lake. This is the entire Rogue Basin, that bowl-shaped land, that surface on the earth that collects water, and it all empties out at Gold Beach right over here. And just want to let you know that even though most of it is undeveloped, there is impacts from various things, but around 4% of the Rogue Basin is agricultural usage, 4% urbanized, and those have a great impact on water quality in our basin. So here's this is Grants Pass, there's Medford Central Point, there's Ashland, just to orient you further. So these impervious surfaces in developed areas have a big impact on waterways, and this is also, the people who live here also rely on municipal wastewater treatment, so centralized water treatment both for their drinking and for their wastewater treatment. So Rogue Riverkeeper focuses a lot on protecting water quality, and water quality is a very convoluted situation that happens in natural water bodies. Lots of different things can happen. Some things that we don't even think of as pollution, such as the rays from the sun, which can heat up a stream. Well, actually, when you're talking about an aquatic ecosystem, that's a problem. And that's actually a damaging impact when you get too much of it. So increased temperature, changes in the way that the water interacts with the land, which is the altered hydrology, changes in the aquatic habitat and the riparian habitat, that's those stream side treed areas. Those are important part of the protecting the water quality and the habitats, both streamside and in the aquatic habitat, and protecting the water quality. Those riparian areas are important. And there's lots of different things that can end up in our waterways. Bacteria, nutrients, all kinds of pollutants. Some of them are from our regular day-to-day life. Driving creates so many pollutants that end up on the roads, that end up washing into the waterways. And that's a big impact. A lot of our regular activities can be very polluting, and that's something that we need to be aware of and take changes to address. Increased sediment, reduction in stream flow. So when you change the flow, whether it's from a drought or withdrawals for whatever usage, that's going to have an impact. And lots of different human activities, is listed on the left there, are a part of having an impact on the water quality in our watershed. Okay. Oh, we go. And of course, climate change and drought is going to make it all that much worse. So just let you know that Rogue Riverkeeper also has a water quality monitoring program. You can check us out on our website. We have information, an annual report card. We work with other entities to let people know about the water quality of various locations on our website that we use with Waterkeeper Alliance called Swim Guide. So you can find that on our website, Swim Guide. So part of the issue is that so many of us are working on water, and there are a lot of jurisdictions that take care of different parts. So when we were submitted some early questions, it kind of covered the whole gamut. And part of the challenge is not only how we, the different entities work together and manage and regulate the water resources, but also how they can communicate and integrate with each other, because you can see all these different agencies. Well, there's going to be overlap, and the water that's flowing through one usage is going to another usage, because all the water is getting used really multiple times, whether it's hitting, falling on the ground and running off, getting into the stream and being used for irrigation or for municipal uses or for habitat or ecological benefit. So all these different agencies can be very confusing. And I just encourage people to try and focus on the big picture. What do we as a region, as a culture, as a community, how do we want to use these valuable resources? And I was just gonna, let's see, click on this. It can be so confusing that the state itself has to, and let's see, are you seeing a document or no? No?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so just, there's lots of different things. The state of Oregon actually had to map out the water agencies. And here's a whole bunch of acronyms just to really confuse you. And this is a 52-page document that covers everything from water rights to who's collecting data and how they are responding to floods. So anyways, you get what I'm talking about there. Oh, let's see. I'm going to go back. Okay, do you see my slide again? Okay. All right. So one of the things I just wanted to stress that's a great helpful tool is something called the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. And the Oregon Department of Water Resources developed this for the first time in 2012. And they're actually mandated every 5 years to review this and make this an up-to-date study. It's a living document. And my contact on the Water Resources Commission, Julie Smitherman, says they are going to be updating that coming up. So I just encourage people to check out, this is a really hefty document, but one of the nice things about the Integrated Water Resources Strategy is it takes a very holistic look at how water is used in the state and what the different overarching processes and systems, how they can interact, and where are we missing information, where can we do actual work to help improve how we use those resources.
I hate to interrupt, Francis. I'm concerned about all the questions we have in our
Okay.
shortage on time.
So there's nothing new in terms of the state of water, but I just encourage people to think about how do we as a community and culture want to use our water and regulate and enforce upon it.
Great.
And that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This clearly is not a 1 hour project we're on here. And in
Julie and I
fact,
talked about that. We're going to work on that, Jeff.
we will run probably till about 6:45. Hope folks will stay as long as they can because we got a bunch of good questions. And in the chat, people have been putting in some helpful links. I'm seeing a lot of interest in the comments about gray water and rainwater catchment. And there's some really excellent links to find out more. There are issues around legality and regulation, and I think we really have to get more serious statewide on those. But there are, if you're a presenter and you have a link you think people might be especially interested in, please put it in the chat. With that, Sarah, would you start asking some of the questions? And again, we're going to try to take as many as we can. And if you're a panelist, don't feel like you need to answer if it's kind of been hit on pretty well by another panelist. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah, it's yours.
Great. Okay, our first pre-submitted question is it legal to use well water to irrigate commercial crops, including cannabis?
Siobhan? Unmute, Siobhan. There we go.
That sounds like a question for the water master. So, so in order to irrigate a commercial crop from a well, that individual would need to have a water right. And so whatever water uses are described in that water right is what the water user would be allowed to do. So folks can irrigate a commercial crop from a well, but in order to do so, they would have to have a water right.
Is that fairly rare, water rights from subsurface water?
It's not rare. However, it's very difficult to acquire new ones. There were a lot that were issued in the late 50s through the 80s. And since then, it's been more and more difficult to acquire a groundwater right or a water right from a well in the Rogue Basin.
Got it. Sarah.
Great. Next question. Using population growth trends in the Rogue Valley, when does the Medford Water Commission forecast that water demand will exceed supply? I think that one would be you, Julie.
There I am, unmute. Okay, so yeah, and those things we are looking at. Currently, we are working on the Rogue Valley Water Supply Resiliency Project, and we are going to be expanding our water treatment plant to have the capacity to serve 65 million gallons per day versus the current, which is 45 million gallons per day. That gives us an extra buffer in those periods of growth, especially as we see demand going up with population growth. How we're going to balance that is with water efficiency and conservation programs, and it's really we're gonna move forward with offering more programs as much as we can to provide those resources and the technical help that people need to find ways to reduce their usage, so that we do stay below that cap and we do have enough water going forward. I am happy to have a conversation more with whoever has asked that question offline to answer it in more detail.
Julie, let me jump in for a second because you mentioned gray water, and Oregon
Yeah.
has not been in the lead on this. Several other states, Arizona and California notably, have
Yeah.
been at it for years, and probably for obvious reasons. But would you put that high on the list, that that the state take a more aggressive approach to gray water incentives and make
I
them
do.
around
Yeah,
construction?
I do. And I also think right now energy rebates are tax. I believe they are not taxed, and water rebates are. So any large efficiency, if you're to get a rebate from a utility for doing something like that, right now that the money that you get for that rebate is taxable. Now, all the energy improvements that are being done, those are not taxable. And so that's something that I think would help encourage people to make these changes and invest in gray water infrastructure.
Let's make a note of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Great. Our next question is, with wells going dry, are there regulations that limit the number of new wells that can be established?
I'll tackle that one. So first, if someone was going to construct a well by a licensed bonded well driller, specifically for domestic purposes, there currently are no regulations within the Rogue Basin that would prohibit any new well construction for domestic purposes specifically. However, if those wells were to be used for irrigation or anything that would require a water right, there is a pretty in-depth review process that has taken place. And so, like I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult nowadays to get a new groundwater right in the area. What the department has done in other areas of the state, based on basin studies for groundwater, is they've identified what we call a critical groundwater area. And within those areas, there are specific rules and regulations for any new well construction. However, within the Rogue Basin, there are no areas that are considered to be critical groundwater areas.
Okay, our next question, will we still have to pay our irrigation fees even if we receive no water?
I'll tackle that one. I think each irrigation district, I'm assuming it's pertaining to irrigation districts, they have individual policies pertaining to those situations. And so I would just recommend, if anybody has any questions about that, contact the irrigation district to see what their policy is regarding that.
They're all really wrestling with that, aren't they? Because they've got their maintenance costs for infrastructure and don't really want to charge people they're not supplying. It's kind of a rough one. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just doing the best they can.
Yeah. Next.
This is a longer one. It has been a devastating year of feeding our small flock of sheep over 12 months out of the year, and plan to cull the herd we have worked on for 8 years to get in the spring. We closed our farm stand and couldn't sell flowers at the farmer's market. We don't have funds to buy water tanks. A farm is nothing without water. And their question is, many farmers are moving. Is there any prediction on when our property values will start to dive?
That's calls for a lot of speculation. I invite any panelist who's brave enough to take a crack at that, but I don't know that anybody's got real sharp insight on that.
Yeah, I think I got a D on economy in high school, so I definitely.
I've been getting a D- on predictions lately. So yeah, what's next, Sarah?
Next one. Will Jackson County deny EFU tax status on farmland that is no longer farmed due to the lack of irrigation water?
I think maybe Siobhan again. Do you know anything about that?
I do not. However, I know during those processes, the assessors and the planners do work quite closely with the water user when they're having to submit the information about, the working farm. And if there are issues regarding droughts, I believe there are some, some forms and some clauses that help still protect that status.
Yeah,
But
if
that's answered by the local planning jurisdiction.
yeah, I think generally the answer is no, you don't use your tax privilege in that case. But we would, if you identify yourself in the chat or someplace, we will verify that and get back to you.
And then our last question, do you think we can adequately address increasing water shortages with small changes on the margins, like asking households and businesses to conserve 10 or 15%? Or are we going to have to change systems and practices that are no longer sustainable?
I think that's partially a question for myself and Siobhan. I think in this case, they're speaking more to the rural area. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, 15, I would say 15, 20%, yes, can make a difference. But yeah, changes to the infrastructure is also going to be necessary. But there are a lot of simple things that can be done as far as changing out fixtures and just learning to live with conservation minded going forward. I think that a lot of us are going to have to change our view of how we use water, what we use our water for. But I do think that 10, 15%, I think that it can help. And so making those smaller changes, even though they seem small, can make a big difference.
There are some.
I would have to.
Go ahead, Siobhan.
Oh no, I was just gonna agree with Julie. Every little bit counts, and it's infectious. Somebody may see somebody doing one thing one day, using water a little less in a pretty unique fashion, and the neighbor might start doing it too. And so it's kind of like the ripple across the pond. It'll make its way across the entire area. So yeah, every little bit helps.
Let me pluck a couple questions out of the chat. There are a lot of good ones there too. Are you all reevaluating the use of water for golf courses, large lawns, and raising cattle?
Yeah, so a couple different questions. I won't touch on the cattle side, but yes, we work with the golf courses. This last year, we put together some water management plans to make sure that the water that they were using was being done as efficiently as possible, that there weren't any leaks, that they all came together and said, we're not going to water the rough, just part of the greens and just the most important greens. So they really took an effort at trying to reduce the amount of water that they were using this past year, given everything that we're all dealing with. And so they did their best to try to keep their water use down. We are looking at future programs. We are looking at lawn and potentially rebates in the future for replacing lawn with more climate appropriate plantings. We're not quite there yet, but it is something that we're looking at. And there are ways, even if someone does have a lawn, there are ways to water that lawn more efficiently. A lot of times with lawn, half of the water that's applied to the landscape goes to waste. It doesn't actually get to where it needs to go. And so just looking at those practices and trying to modify how you're applying water can make a big difference. So yes, we are looking at that, and we are working closely with our golf courses and looking at new programs going forward.
Well, a little more on lawns, Julie. Is there any way to quantify the total demand of ornamental lawns in our basin? What were we talking about?
Yeah, there would be some GIS work to that. There'd be quite a bit of work to that, but we do have, everyone waters it a little bit differently. We have a watering hotline. Every year, every summer season, we record a message at the beginning of the week, letting people know how much to be watering during that time. Lawns need a particular amount of water to stay healthy. And also shrubs and perennial plantings need a certain amount of water. So we put together a watering schedule And that is available on our website, and it changes, it goes all the way through the summertime, and it's based on 2-week periods throughout the summer. So as you go through the summer, the water needs change of all these plants. And so we provide that as a resource to help people know how much to be watering their specific landscape.
Now, there are some jurisdictions that have used block pricing strategies such
Mhm.
that people can have their lawns, but it's going to be really expensive in terms of water to do it, and have shaped some behaviors that way. Should we be doing more of that?
And we do have that in place right now. We do have tiered rates. And so the more water you use, the more you're going to have to pay for that. And so
Are we doing that as steeply as we should, do you think? Is there any more gain to be had in that direction?
I think it's something we can always look at, and it would take a longer conversation than we have time for right now. But I think that price point does provide a type of a incentive, to use water more efficiently.
Mhm. There was, as I mentioned, a lot of interest in rainwater catchment. I think it's great. And I wonder if you think, any of you, and Greg, you can get in here too, what is the potential? Can you envision over the next few years gaining a lot of water, a significant amount in the aggregate from rainwater catchment? And is the startup cost, is the cost, the front end cost, prohibitive to doing it on a really large scale?
That's a good question. Part of the issue with really storing a lot of the water is right now the precipitation comes at a time of year when we're not really using, active irrigation. So you'd have to have pretty big systems to store a lot of water.
Right.
So that's sometimes, as you mentioned, can be cost prohibitive. I think it can be, on a smaller scale, putting tanks under, driveways or in yards to water, your lawn and your gardens and stuff like that can be very effective. And then also you can also harvest your rainwater, collect it, rain barrels, and reuse that. So there is some possibility, but I'm not sure it'll ever be a really large scale solution. And then I'm not sure if Siobhan can provide any insight. There are places where there are some water rights concerns with capturing water in terms of water rights and not letting it go into the aquifer. So that definitely complicates the issue as well.
Yeah. Did you want to add, Siobhan?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, the collection of rainwater is one of the uses that are considered exempt from the water right process. So you do not need a water right to collect rainwater as long as the collection occurs on an artificial impervious surface. So that's where the sometimes the misunderstanding comes in, is that the rainwater hits the ground and it flows down the hillside, you can collect it. But however, that collection does require water rights. So the
Right.
collection of rainwater collected on an artificial impervious surface does not require any water use authorizations.
And I believe typically that is considered a structure. So your roof, whatever you can collect off of any structures on your property.
There has been a perennial fight in Salem, and we had a classic case, a famous case here in Jackson County of a reservoir, a little dam on some rural land where a little tributary had been collected and used for irrigation. And there's some who feel like, if water falls on your land, that's your water. But those are tributaries to streams that are allocated by water rights. So I expect it will continue to be kind of a hot issue. We have a few more minutes, and there's, I haven't really made as much of a scratch in the chat. Sarah, are you able to enable folks who want to ask a question to speak?
Absolutely. If you would like to ask a live question, you can utilize the raise hand function so we can get a line going. The raise hand function is down in the reactions section on the bottom of your screen. And then I'll call on you and you'd be able to then unmute yourself.
Let's see. we see
All
any
right,
hands.
looks
Oh, there's
like-
she.
Yeah, Kayla, it looks like your hand was first. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, go ahead, Kayla. Kayla, you're muted.
There.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of the solutions that you're all talking about are on individual people, which somebody else mentioned is a small fraction of the overall water use. And not very much is being done about big cattle growers, big agribusiness, cannabis farms, and other things that I think need to be regulated, and not all the costs going to individual land, homeowners.
Mhm. Any response to that?
Well, I just want to add that the local soil and water conservation district, like Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, they have financial programs to help out landowners and others, and they're also working with large landowners and even small to convert irrigation from, flood irrigation to either spray or drip to really, make an impact from a large scale in terms of, the efficiency and losses to evaporation. And there's also some infrastructure projects that the districts are doing, like piping the canals, which also helps just basically reduce loss into the ground and evaporation. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure I saw Paul make a comment from Jackson Soil and Water. So there are some folks on this call and some local resources to find more information about, but there is some things that are being done, or are some things.
And Kayla, you're really talking about limiting water use for certain kinds of ranching and agriculture, which has, been about as hot a struggle as we've had in Salem. And there hasn't been the will to do that, at least till this point. You can look over the hill into the Klamath Basin to see what a calm conversation that is. Pepper Trail, welcome. Do you have a question or comment?
Yep, just let myself get unmuted. Yeah, thanks for this great forum. This is probably a question for Siobhan. It's my understanding that if you have an existing groundwater right, so one of those older groundwater rights, which are hard to get now, but if you have one of those, your actual use is usually not metered. So there's no way to know whether the water right is being exceeded or not, in contrast to, sort of a typical water right from a stream. So is my understanding correct? And is metering of those groundwater rights being considered as part of a comprehensive water management solution?
Yeah, great question. If we look at water rights, not specifically just groundwater rights or surface water rights, just water rights as a whole, the metering requirement for any water right was not part of the initial right until what I want to say recently, until the early 90s. So as of the early 90s, any new water right is going to have that measurement and or reporting requirements. Anytime anybody does change to an existing right, regardless of the age of it, in order for that change to move forward, they're going to have some type of measurement and or reporting as a condition of that water right. My agency went through a program. To be honest, that's one of the reasons why I first got hired in 2003. Is we went through this program called the Significant Points of Diversion. And so we looked at every single water right in the state that was considered significant, meaning that there were water rights that took more than 5 cubic feet per second out of any source and or greater than a 0.25 CFS, which is roughly a little over 100 gallons a minute. We identified all of those water rights, and we're slowly working with those individuals to get flow meters or some type of measurement on those water rights. So yes, it would be considered part of some comprehensive plan. It is something that is identified in that integrated water resources strategy documents that Francis had mentioned earlier. So it is something that my agency is working towards, increasing measurements on water diversions regardless of the source.
Let me be clear, Siobhan, I didn't quite get it. Are you saying that the objective and the goal and intention is eventually to have all water rights holders have their use metered or measured in some fashion?
You know, I'm not sure if that's the total goal, overall goal, but one of the goals is to have a better idea of actually how much water is being consumed on water rights that have been issued by the department. And the only way to identify that is to have flow measurements data on existing water rights. And so that's kind of the goal, is to try to get a better grasp on how much water currently is being used versus how much water has been allocated.
In the current system, do the most senior water rights holders have much of an incentive to use water efficiently?
In my opinion, they do, because most of the older water right holders, they're pretty good stewards of the resource, and they understand, how precious that resource is. And, what they would not want to have happen is, a water user upstream of them to be using water inefficiently. That would detrimentally impact them. And so, in my experience, most of these older water users, they're good stewards, and they understand, the benefits of, conserving, what little resources that we do have.
Megan, I see your hand up. Would you like to make a comment or ask a question? Megan, are you there? Sarah, are you seeing any other hands? I see no other. Megan, I see your hand. Well, there's Lynn Kellogg. Hi, Lynn. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, this is Dan. I'm her husband. We're watching
hi,
this
Dan.
together.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. I just have a question, and I always had the perception that I guess my question is it legal to purchase water from the city of Medford or the water district Medford there, from that water center, and apply it to your agricultural crop on your private property without a water right?
Yes, that is correct. That's what the fill stations are there for. And they're there only if the Water Commission has surplus water, meaning we have enough to meet the needs of all of our residents and all of our communities that we serve. Anything left over is able to be used from the fill station to help the residents and the communities that live outside of the city limits.
What was the case this last year on that, Julie? Were there a lot of days when you weren't serving bulk water?
Actually, no. The only reason why we had to shut down the bulk water sales was because we had a chlorine shortage in June, which and chlorine is the sodium hypochlorite is what we use to treat our water. And so if we run out of that, then we're not able to treat the water. And so we had to limit water use from the stations until we were assured that we were going to get the shipments that we needed.
How often have you limited or shut down bulk water for lack of water?
I don't think we ever have. I'd have to double check on that, but in the most recent years, I don't think we've ever had to do that.
Mm-hmm. And is there any need or interest in any changes in policy on bulk water?
We're looking at a different system right now to manage the water that's used from the Medford Water Commission. There's two fill stations. One is at the Medford Water Commission Service Center, and the other is in Jackson County. And so we are upgrading the service center fill station to more accurately track water that's being used there. Typically, if we're looking at how much water is being used by the fill stations in in comparison to the overall water use for the entire system. In years past, it's been about 1%. This last year, it did go up. It did go up to about 2% with the combination of the Jackson County fill station as well as the Water Commission fill station. And so we did see usage pretty much double from last year because of the early shutdowns of the irrigation systems mainly. And again, we watch that, we monitor the usage, the demand every day to make sure that we are still in that safe threshold of having enough water to supply to all of our communities. And so that's how we base that decision.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. Mark Gibson.
Can I follow up on my question?
Yeah, you can make a comment, Dan. Go ahead.
It seems to me, or my question, I wonder if it's profitable to buy water to grow anything but illegal hemp and marijuana. Oh, is the price of the water make it for a legal hemp grow? Could they afford to buy water and make it go? Is my question.
Can they afford to?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. I'm sorry. That it is right now. It's not very expensive, but the rate will likely increase for that fill station as we put in a new system.
I will mention, Dan, I'm not quite sure if this is part of your question, but part of what we have to figure out in Salem, and I mentioned before, there's a lot of work to do in this coming session, is preventing use of bulk water by illegal cannabis grows. It's not a real straightforward, easy thing to do, but there's a lot of interest in that. Yeah, Mark and then Liza, and then we'll probably wrap up. Yeah, Siobhan?
I was just gonna say, to add to Dan's question, those bulk water stations are used by many different farmers. A lot of folks don't use it as their #1 source, but maybe as an alternative source or a supplemental source to get a few folks by, maybe before the irrigation district starts delivering water, or if an irrigation district ends early to get them by for a week or 2. So those stations are used for many different types of agriculture.
Thanks, Sean.
Mark?
Yes. First, I want to thank all of you for putting on this public information program. Very useful. I wanted to check, looking down the road here, if we have a prolonged drought, what happens if the Lost Creek Reservoir goes down to maybe 20% capacity? I know that that's our secondary source for water, but we have communities upstream from us and communities and water needs below stream. If the Rogue River went down to 20%, how would that be portioned out to all the entitlements that are contracted for deliveries?
That's a great question. Thank you. I appreciate that question. Siobhan, you can jump in too. If it ever did get to that point, we would have to implement our curtailment plan, which would really restrict. We'd start out with voluntary, but it would immediately go to probably an emergency situation. And so we would have to restrict a lot of landscape watering at that point, and minimize that to get those water uses down so that we could at least serve the communities with domestic water. So all their indoor uses. It's not something that, that's not something we want to have to do, but in that instance, that would be an emergency situation, and we would implement our curtailment plan at the highest level.
Is there contingency planning going on right now for really bad water scenarios over the next 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, we look at that. We have a water management and conservation plan that we update every 5 years. We'll be doing a update to it this year. And then a full new report in the next couple of years. And so we are looking at all those supplies, trying to factor in the change in climate, how that's going to impact our supplies. It looks at those supplies, the demand of our community, population growth, and then strategies to use the water that we have as efficiently as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And last question from Liza, please.
Hi. I'm interested in stormwater, and I heard the woman from Rogue Riverkeeper talk about how the stormwater carries pollutants into the stream, and also wondering about, like, I've heard that you can use bioswales and different ways of actually capturing the stormwater rather than it running out to the ocean and sinking it down into the groundwater and helping recharge wells and just recharge our water system. And so I'm wondering, are there ways that the city is working with that, and is it cost effective, and kind of what's your thought on that?
To jump in on that. So I spent several years working for Rogue Valley Sewer Services in their stormwater department. And so there is a part of the Clean Water Act through the Department of Environmental Quality that regulates stormwater management for most all of our communities. And so, yes, there is regulation that requires new development now to actually have all of their stormwater to infiltrate or be somehow managed on site. So, but that's only for new development. Now, the cities and the counties could require or assist or incentivize those kinds of stormwater management features like you're talking about, Liza. They could make that more something that they emphasize, but currently under state law regulations, which is called the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Permit, it's only required for new development, but it has a lot of benefits because even in old development, if we can keep that water from running into the storm drains and help get the swales and the soil and with the plants to treat that water and hold it so that that polluted water doesn't run right into a pipe, into a creek. This is something that if you are a resident or you care, you can go to your planning commission, you can go to your city council, and you can say, this is important, we need to do it. Even though we have lots of development that's already happened, we can try and get that to happen there. And because currently the law is only for new development.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to that too. We work a lot with stormwater management in the communities that manage the Clean Water Act programs as well. So we work with Francis for a while. So all the local communities in the greater Medford area, with the exception of Jacksonville, have programs. They're all required to do different management strategies and enforcement. And then there's also, I mentioned, volunteering, getting involved, learning more. There are things that residents can do at home, rain gardens, and other things that can help. So it'll be done on a much smaller scale, but there's some resources on the Stream Smart website, which has some good information about local water quality. But there are some things you can do at home and things that are being done in the region to try to help improve the urban runoff, so reduce the amounts and then also improve the quality. And a lot of it's emphasizing infiltration, like Francis had mentioned.
Let's squeeze in one more last question from Lori, please. Lori, can you hear me? If you're talking, you're muted. Well, I guess we are.
Okay, I'm now unmuted. Can you
Go
hear me?
ahead. Yes.
I live in Grants Pass, and we have a small homestead where we hadn't been horribly impacted, but I'm more concerned about what's coming out in the ditches through Grants Pass Irrigation. I was wondering if, and we have filtered, etc., but I'm just curious, has it gotten worse? Any better? What can we do to help our other farmers and our other ranchers?
But by gotten worse, you mean what, Laura? Are you talking about the quality?
The pollutants that come through the Grants Pass Irrigation District. It's pollutants. It's everything runs downhill, and a lot we're seeing now, thank goodness, a lot of young farmers who just don't understand what that impact might be.
So let's give Francis a last word on what somebody can do who's got concerns in that.
Well,
space.
if you're talking about water quality of irrigation water, the impacts are coming usually from people's agricultural practices, whether they're flood irrigating and it's going over soil and manure filled fields or what. So the irrigation districts they have some obligation to protect water quality, but the source is happening on the ground with the people who are applying water and then letting it run off back into the ditch. So
Understandable, but is there anything that I can teach younger farmers and ranchers to protect their properties? Because after 20 years of farming here,
right.
it's been iffy at best.
Well, unfortunately, Josephine County, there's not as many resources, but in Jackson County, I recommend the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District as a resource.
Thank you, but you have no resources down here.
Try OSU Extension also.
Yeah.
You have my email if you guys can figure anything out to help us, because we are a very valid source of ranching and some really beautiful produce
Lori,
that we share within the entirety of Jackson and Josephine County.
Lori, let me encourage you to contact Frances. You can find her online at Rogue Riverkeeper, and I'll bet you can pursue this. And it is.
I just, I'm an old gal, but I would really like to see the kids have a chance in this God's green universe.
Right on. Thank you. We need a lot more of that. Thank you, Lori. It's
Thank
7
you.
o'clock. And I really want to thank our panel. We got a richness of resources here. And in our next newsletter, we're going to put down contact information for all these folks. You can probably figure it out yourself from the invitation that has the names and the organizations, but we'll get explicit, and you can contact any one of them, I'm sure, for to go deeper into any of their specialty areas. Really, thank you all. You can bet this isn't our last conversation on this. I am hopeful that on the state level, that we are ready to continue a sustained commitment to what we can do to help people convert and get smarter. And there are other issues that are just political. When you start talking about what the farming and ranching industry has and the current level of regulations, you're flat into some of our most difficult politics. But if that's your interest area, there are groups where you can get involved with that as well. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the newsletter. I put in the chat where to go if you're not on the newsletter, because I'll take any opportunity I can. And Happy New Year, everybody. And let's make 22 better than 21. Again, thanks very much to our presenters.
Thank you, Senator Golden. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Senator Golden.